Good afternoon, everyone. It's Ashley with Court Reserve. We are so excited to have you here today on our Instructor Essentials webinar. I am joined by two of my favorite product people, and that is your guides today. Kim and Josh is going to be on our Q&A and chat today. So again, a few housekeeping things. We are going to record this, and at some point today or tomorrow, it will be up on the Court Reserve YouTube channel. In order to always stay in tune with what we're doing at Court Reserve, I would highly recommend you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Pretty easy to do. And then you'll be notified anytime we throw up a new video that Josh, Willie, and Kim and their team do. We want to thank you guys for all of the things that you're allowing us to put into Court Reserve. And especially if you're new, this is going to be a great webinar for you. So, Kim, let's hit our first slide. So, today is the last day. At 5 o'clock Eastern time today, I am cutting off registrations for our Catalyst in Phoenix. It is next Monday. We already have, I think it's 32 people registered, and it covers about 25 different organizations. So they're spending one day with us next Monday in Phoenix. If you want to come today by 5 o'clock today, we're cutting off registration because we have to define food. And then we're also coming to Austin, Texas next month, and we're all going to be in Austin as well. So don't forget to sign up for that. We are going to have some additional locations later on this year, but if you are new or want to get the latest greatest and spend some time with us, then I would encourage you to do Phoenix or Austin today. Don't forget, if you are a pickleball facility, Club Pickleball Mastermind is coming. June is our next date. Extraordinary couple of days. You learn all about how to run a pickleball business, all about best practices. I mean, you're going to blow through money regardless if you make good decisions or not. So take the time, come to Pickleball Club Mastermind, save yourself some time and some money for sure. So put your questions. You want those in the Q&A or the chat, Josh?
We can put those in the Q&A.
Okay. So questions from today, we'll let Kim kind of drive the boat today, whether she wants to, stop in between, but put those in and we'll get all your questions answered at the end, and let's get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. So yeah, let's throw those questions in the Q&A section here. And then I've got them in front of my screen. So as I see stuff come up, we can just answer those questions live for you. And Josh is helping me facilitate some of those questions in the background as well. So we're here today to talk about instructors in Court Reserve. So instructors in Court Reserve have been around for quite a while. Instructors are a way for you to schedule instructors in the system for lessons, events, awesome things like that. And so we also allow you to give those instructors abilities in the background, whether they're admins or sub-admins, like booking their own lessons and things like that. So an instructor is another system user that you will have at your organization. And so all instructors are either an admin or a sub-admin. So when you are creating or editing a new instructor, your instructors can either be, again, an admin or a sub-admin, and that just really controls the granularity of the abilities that you give them as a user. So when you are creating or editing an existing admin or sub-admin, you're going to want to enable them as an instructor. So if you don't have them enabled as an instructor, you can see here I lost quite a bit of settings here to fill out. But when I do have a user as an instructor, I can complete a whole slew of information about that user. And then if they're an instructor, I can also choose what their availability is. So this is when they can be booked, and then also additional unavailable time. So we'll get into that here in a few minutes. I did want to touch on this additional role right here, and is coordinator. So a coordinator in Court Reserve is, how do I best describe it? It's kind of like an instructor light. So it's not the type of instructor that you can put on an event and have that person see a schedule, but it is a user in your system that you can assign to different events or league matches. And so it gives you some flexibility with what you can allow that person to control. So if this person was a coordinator, I could say they only had access to specific events, and they can only help me manage the registration for those specific events or things like that. This is great. It's a great role to give to maybe, a front desk person who is working on the weekends and helping you manage a specific round robin or something like that, just to kind of keep you hands off on every single little aspect that's happening to some events. Or we also have organizations that use coordinators to do maybe some of their open play. So they assign, they'll assign some of their members to be a system user and give them this coordinator role. And a coordinator will allow you to just kind of really pin down specific events that this person can control based on their subadmin settings. So getting back to instructors, each instructor, you can assign a different type of instructor. So this just allows you to categorize your instructors if you do that. So you can do different reporting based on instructor types. You can create different Book a Pro schedulers based on instructor types. It's another way of filtering your instructors. As we get further into kind of our roadmap on instructor payroll and things like that, these instructor types do become important as far as setting up what it might look like to set up instructor payouts and things like that down the road. Not a current feature that we have available, but an instructor type is valuable in categorizing your instructors. You can choose an instructor background color. That's just the color that instructor's initials are going to show up on your scheduler when you book them on schedulers. And then there are allowed lesson types. So you can add lesson types here, but if you're just really in the process of setting up your setting up your club right now, maybe you haven't thought about lesson types, but you have certain users that are going to be your instructors, you can actually set up lesson types in the instructor setup section too, and assign lesson types to instructors further down the road here as we're going through setup. And then event categories. This just tells the system what event categories that your instructors are allowed to be added to, and it won't show them as conflicted if they're not able to be added to the event. So then we get into our instructor availability. Now, instructor availability really is optional. So if you're going to be, just booking pros and, you kind of have more open availability, then you might not need to use availability intervals, but availability intervals comes hugely into play when you start using the Book a Pro scheduler. So if you're going to be making those schedulers public for people to book on through the member portal, you definitely want to have availability intervals in there, because availability intervals are going to look at your hours of operation, and then you can say, between the hours that I'm open, I want this instructor to be available for lesson bookings between this time and this time, but then they're going to take a break and they're going to have lunch, and then they're going to work from 1 to 5. So it sets the amount of time that they're available, and I'll show you how this works with their schedule when we go look at their schedule, but it sets the unavailable time to be outside of their availability. And so you have open availability between your unavailable times. And then you can also set additional upcoming unavailable times. So, let's say this instructor isn't going to work on Sundays or Mondays for the next few months. So you could set, availability in here, but then go and throw an unavailable time on top of that, just, to take care of things like vacations and stuff like that. So you do have some flexibility with how this availability interval works with combining it with unavailable times. And again, I'll show you how some of this works when we look at instructor schedules. So then as we move down our settings page here, we've got additional settings like temporarily disable online bookings. For whatever reason, you don't want this pro to be bookable online. It's an easy, quick tick of this checkbox here, and then that pro is not available anymore. You can also set the max number of lessons per day that this instructor is available to teach, and then also unbookable time between lessons. So let's say you have an instructor that you have a very large facility, your instructor needs to get from your clay courts to your hard courts, and there's 100 courts in between. I know there aren't too many facilities that big, but you want to give them, a few minutes between lessons to go to the restroom, get a drink of water, reset their equipment, things like that. You can do unbookable time between lessons as well. So then we get down into some important instructor settings that we should probably be aware of. So, You always want your instructors to be able to create reservations. If they can't create a reservation, they're not going to be able to book their own lessons. So that's number one in my book on ones that you want them to be able to have, especially if they're going to be able to control their availability, control their own schedule, things like that. Creating reservations is essential. I also recommend instructors have the ability to create reservations in the past. We've all been there. They're teaching a clinic. Somebody asks if they're free for the next hour and they want to just go right into a lesson after the clinic. That instructor can come back later and book that lesson on the court and take care of that lesson booking after the fact. So then we get down here to editing reservations. So if you only want an instructor to be able to edit things that they own, i.e. things that they are assigned to, you're going to want to pay attention to these owned only settings. So, they can't edit any reservation, but they can edit the reservations that they own. So, Johnny can't go edit Ben's lessons. So they kind of keep each other separate from their lessons. And then delete any reservations owned only. This is one that we actually added within the last year. So it prevents the instructor from deleting a reservation within X hours prior to their lesson. So you as an admin can kind of lock down the time in advance that a player can maybe cancel their lesson, and then also an admin or I'm sorry, a sub-admin and an instructor can cancel their lessons as well. And then the viewing events is an important one too, because if you want if you want an instructor to be able to add players or see your list of upcoming events and things like that on your event list, you're going to want them to be able to view and then manage registrants. Also, if you want them to be able to register players to events, they're going to need to be able to manage registrants on those events as well. And then edit events, I always like to give them edit events because if they can't edit events, they actually can't change what court they're on that event. So if something comes up, they get to clay court number 3, it's still wet from the rain you had 3 hours ago. They can't go into the event and change the court. So you want to make sure that they can edit those events as well. And then we get into some additional settings like email event registrants, allow the maximum enrollment to be exceeded. Those are all kind of self-explanatory. So these communication ones like email registrant, text event registrants, that's all communication related. So if you're, again, your instructor is on the court, they can actually open up their app and they can notify players directly from their app. So this will control what abilities they have on contacting those players. Personal instructor settings, that is another one that's very important. If you want them to be able to control their own availability, like we went over up in here, then you want them to have that setting as well. And then we get into scheduling instructors. That's just when they're editing events, they can schedule instructors, they can schedule another instructor's lessons. And then you've got some approval permissions too here. So on Book of Pro schedulers, we can approve lessons as well. So they could approve lessons that maybe they own. And then managing members is another good one. So if you want maybe a instructor to go in and be able to make notes about a player after a lesson or send that player emails or create a new member, maybe that's somebody that just walks up to the court and wants to start playing. If you're at a public facility, they can do all of those kinds of things. Editing members is also important if you're going to have instructors being on duty to update like player ratings and stuff like that too. So if they can't manage part of members, they're not going to be able to make updates to player profiles. And so we also have lots of other settings on here, initiate POS, things like that. That's all kind of related to what you might offer at your specific facility. Let's go down here and see if we have another ones that might apply here. So we've got allow this user to create conflicting events and reservations, and then add conflicting events, lessons, reservations to the instructor schedule. So these are important if you're going to have like time that might be overlapping on lessons, or you for some reason need to double book. Maybe you've blocked one court and with a reservation type, you want to assign the instructor to that court too. You want them to be able to sometimes create conflicting reservations too for whatever reason. Instruct and scheduler visibility. This is always an interesting one that I'm not sure a lot of our customers know that we have. You can actually limit scheduler visibility for all of your admins and sub-admins to specific schedulers that you offer. So, just depending on how you have your organization and your custom schedulers created, you maybe have some instances where you only want the instructor to see their schedule or specific schedulers. Maybe you have a specific scheduler built for your front desk. You want to also have your instructors see that scheduler. You can assign specific schedulers to their visibility and then also their schedule as well. All right. So that's a lot of settings. I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions, Josh, that we could answer live.
Yes, we do have two questions. We can start off over with the instructor availability. So the question is around if it's more efficient to use the actual intervals to create availability, or if it's more efficient to use the unavailable time, sort of recurrences that we can set up. I know that can differ based on the actual availability that the instructor is going to have. So if we can maybe
Yeah,
clarify when to use
yeah,
which one.
so it kind of depends, and it's sometimes it's a good idea to play with it a little bit too to see what might work best for your instructor's availability and for the way you run your organization. So yeah, you can set availability intervals um, to have unavailable time rather than available time. Absolutely. Unavailable time, the only thing with unavailable time is when you create unavailable time, that's going to be reoccurring. Josh, you and I just looked at this the other day. I'm gonna lean on you here to confirm, but I believe when you're booking unavailable time, you're only limited to a certain number of days out that you can, or a certain number of occurrences that you can
Correct.
book these unavailable times. So, unavailable time is great if you know that basically they're going to be teaching from they have the possibility to teach from open to close when they're no matter when they're booked, but then they're going to always have an hour lunch between 12 and 1. That's definitely a possibility there. It just kind of depends on the way you run your organization. If you've got some pros that maybe only work a couple days a week and they're very restricted to the times that they can teach as well. It's just kind of dependent on how you want to set it up. So there is some flexibility there. But yeah, you can create unavailable time. It's just going to essentially be a reoccurring event that does time out, but these availability intervals you can actually set indefinitely into the future as well.
Great.
I see a question. I skipped over access to instructor schedule. Is that not an important one? So accessing instructor schedule is it's the scheduler here. So as an admin, you have this instructor scheduler right here. So if you don't want your instructors to be able to see all of your instructor schedules, you would maybe want to minimize access to this. They would still be able to see my schedule though, if you did not give them access to the instructor scheduler.
Awesome. And then we do have one more question, but I know this is going to relate to the Book a Pro scheduler setup, so we
Yeah.
can hold off on that
Okay.
question until we get to that point.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so I'm going to keep plugging along here. So we did talk a lot about how to create an instructor, instructors versus coordinators, and instructor availability versus unavailability. You can also, if you've got a pro that's being able to manage their schedule too, they can actually go into their individual schedules and throw extra unavailable time on there too. So let's say, something comes up and my pro here knows that he's not going to be available at 2 o'clock today. He can go, throw a quick 2 o'clock unavailable on his schedule, and then nothing would be able to be booked in that place. All right, so let's get into some lesson types and pricing for lessons. So we kind of touched on lesson types here, but lesson types are definitely a part of your setup that you're going to want to make sure is set up and fully set out with pricing and things like that. So a lesson type is going to be very similar to a reservation type. And so when you have a lesson type, you're creating a name, you're setting the minimum and maximum reservation times for this type of lesson, and then the duration increments that you're allowing this lesson to be booked for. Now, you'll notice here that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different lesson types. So I've created a private lesson type, a semi-private lesson type, which a lot of organizations would think of as a 2-to-1 type lesson, a pro plus 3, so a 3-to-1 type lesson, and then a group lesson, which maybe is a group of players of 4 or more. So with lessons, if you are going to be pricing based on the number of players on the court, you do have to have a different lesson type for each kind of lesson, just because pricing is controlled at the lesson type level at the instructor level. So we'll show you the grid here in a few minutes that has the instructor, the lesson type, you set the pricing for that lesson. So if this private lesson is booked for a player, they show up with a second player, you would have to edit the lesson to a semi-private lesson to get the pricing for a 2-to-1 lesson. You could certainly charge them for the full price on the private lesson with 2 players if they show up with an unannounced visitor. But that's another, just a way of doing business and how you want to operate. But I do recommend setting up different lesson types if you're going to be pricing them differently. Now you'll notice here minimum and maximum players. Oops, I dragged that down. So minimum and maximum players allows you again to then control how many players can be booked on those lesson types. This is going to come in hugely important into play with your Book a Pro schedulers. So that way, if somebody books a private lesson online, they're only allowed to add 1 player to that reservation that they're booking with a pro. Same thing with semi-pro and all of my additional lesson types here. So if I want to max out a certain number of lessons and require a minimum too, so you would always want to make sure that you're setting that minimum maximum time appropriately. Josh, any questions that I can ask about this?
Right now we are all good. We just have the one question that's around Book a Pro. Let's see here. Is there any way to add a indoor court fee or a guest fee to a lesson? This one actually just came in.
Okay, cool. So indoor court fee, that's an interesting one. So it depends on how you have those lesson types or your organization set up. So if you have an indoor court, you can either set up a lesson type for your indoor court, so you would have a separate lesson type, or you can also create, and I can get into this with custom costs too. You can create in the pricing section a custom cost for specific. Can you create it? Sorry, that one threw me for a loop real quick. Josh, you want to help me out here real quick? I don't want to give somebody wrong information. I thought maybe we had one for a specific court type here, but I'm not seeing it. Do you have any suggestions on what we could do here?
I do not believe we have a way to set a price based on a certain court type for lessons.
Okay, so in that case, thank you for confirming that.
Yeah.
It's been that would be a good item that we could add to a custom instructor costs here, but as an improvement. But yeah, if you wanted to set a different price for that indoor court, you would then need to set it up as a different lesson type. Okay, so that brings us to the instructor cost and the scheduling restrictions area. So let's say you've added new lesson types. Instead of going in and adding them to all of your instructors individually, you can actually come into scheduling restrictions here and quickly add them to all of the instructors that you have in your system and pick and choose which ones are available. Once your lesson type is available to the individual pros, you can then come in and set their private lesson pricing. Now, there is a point to where once you actually get into this table with a certain number of instructors, you actually only see them by individual instructor, so it's a little bit easier to manage. But you would then just come into each lesson type. Each lesson type has its own grouping and set up the different rates, whether they're hourly or fixed, for all of your different levels of membership. So you've got, again, this is how you can, apply discounting to lesson prices based on maybe a membership type. So let's say, this membership type can have one rate, this membership type can have a different rate. So again, another way that you can kind of differentiate preference on membership levels to what they're paying on lessons with pros. So then you would then come in and set lesson rates for all of your different pricing available. And that's how the system's going to look. It's going to look at the lesson type and the pricing per player on the lesson, and it's going to charge that to your players. All right. So let me just look at my list here real quick of things that I want to go over. So that really just takes us into the Book a Pro setup. So we've set up all of our instructors, we've set up all of our pricing and our lesson types, and now we can make those pros available online for players to book for lessons. And so when we're booking or when we're creating a Book a Pro setup, it's really it's a custom scheduler that instead of looking at courts, it's looking at our instructors. So it's going to be viewable very similar to our custom scheduler, expanded scheduler view, to where you'll have, instead of a court slot, you have an instructor slot, and it's going to show their instructor schedule basically for the day. So you're going to go in here and set up your Book a Pro scheduler. I'm going to edit this one that I already created. And you're going to give it a name. And then if you want to make it available in your navigation, I highly recommend giving it a navigation name here. They can always match or they can be slightly different. And then you're going to show that navigation name on the member portal. And then this is where you can filter based on what instructor types you have. So if I want all of my tennis pros to be on one scheduler, I can set it up based on filtering by the instructor types. I can also get as granular as adding specific instructors. So we have some organizations who want specific instructors to be on certain schedulers. You can do that. You can also limit the type of lessons that are offered, and which ones require approval and things like that. Courts can be optional. So you can, allow the system to pick a court or allow the player to book the court. And then you can also say what courts they have available. This is a cool setting right here, scheduler booking type. So this can be a scheduler that you can use to view and schedule lessons, or it can be view only. So if it was a view only schedule, your players would just be able to see what the instructor has, but not actually schedule anything. And then you can limit membership type, member group type that's able to view it just like you can another scheduler as well. Show Book a Pro scheduler for non-logged in users. This is going to be one that allows you to show your Book a Pro scheduler publicly like you can your court scheduler. So you can show your court scheduler public to people that aren't logged in. If you do this with Book a Pro, it's going to block out names and things like that if it's a private lesson. But it's going to allow, just the general public to even see what you've got available and upcoming. Required payment profile, again, just depending on what type of memberships you offer, what your operating business rules are. For Book a Pro scheduler, requiring upfront payment might be a good idea, depending on how far out you have these lessons booked. It just guarantees that payment. You're not chasing people down and things like that. If they're just doing a payment profile, their payment profile fails. And then I got those reversed. Required payment profile just requires them to have a payment profile on their account to book the lesson, and then requiring upfront payment requires them to pay for that lesson before they're finished booking it. So it does follow those upfront payment rules that you have set for reservations. And so just like a reservation, you can require them to pay for that lesson at the time of booking. And then these additional settings here are all pretty self-explanatory. Time in advance instructors can be scheduled. And then days in advance to show availability. So you can show availability maybe 2 weeks in advance. Time in advance that they can be scheduled is 10 days in this case. And then time to open next available reservation day. That's very similar to the reservation setting, to where you can say, okay, they can book 10 days in advance, but 10 days in advance, those lessons are going to open for booking at 7 a.m. And then buffer minutes before scheduling a lesson. This just says if a pro is, if we're within like 24 hours, not 24 minutes, if we're within a certain amount of time, it does have to be in minutes, that the players online wouldn't be able to book. So let's just, for realistic purposes, make this like 180 minutes. And then show time on the schedule button. And then you get into the intervals. So intervals say the different interval minutes that a player can book these lessons, when also looking at your restrictions to what you set up for the durations when you set up these lessons. So if you say that the minimum duration of a lesson is 60 minutes, this will allow them to book 60 minutes plus like an additional 30 minutes, depending on the instructor's availability. And then you get just the kind of scheduling start and end dates. So the schedulers will start offering lessons on specific dates, but then these are the dates that they are available to be viewed. And then preventing sandwich time of minutes. So this is going to answer that question that came in earlier, and allowing for gap time in an instructor scheduler or instructor schedule. So if you don't want those 30-minute gaps, this is going to be the setting that you use on Book a Pro. It's only, I believe it's only a setting that we're offering in Book a Pro right now. It's not a setting, Josh, do you remember? It's not a setting that we actually have at the instructor level, correct?
Yeah, so I believe how it works is the sandwich time is looking at the instructor's scheduler. So
Yeah. So it is similar to how it works on the scheduler for custom schedulers. So you can prevent sandwich time on a custom scheduler of X minutes. It's going to work the same way on an instructor schedule. So it's going to say prevent those 30-minute gaps, prevent, the hour gaps, things like that, just as a way of maximizing your pro's time. Hiding lesson details is an important one. And then allowing cancellations, you again, based on your business practices, set the cancellation time that players can actually go in, cancel their lessons. Same thing with edit lessons. With edit lessons, you have four different settings here that you can actually determine the amount of time prior to the lesson that they can edit, whether they can edit the lesson type to maybe add more players, and then the time of the lesson as well. So you can kind of lock down some restrictions there when a player is booking or editing their own lessons. And then similar to your custom schedulers, you can control the availability that the pros can be booked online. So a lot of times, you might have hours of operation, so you have a maximum amount of time on your schedulers. Your hours of operation might be 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., but you only want your pros to be booked from 8 to 9 p.m. So you can kind of play with the amount of time there that they're able to be booked online. And then in that case, if a pro does want to book a lesson at 7 a.m., they can, but they can kind of pick and choose what lessons come in on those times. All right. I see some questions here, Josh, so I'm gonna just answer them. So when a member books a lesson, how is the pro notified? So that is a great question, and I am glad you asked it because I did not have that on my list of items here to go by. So when a pro is booked for a lesson, all of those notifications are going to be housed in your notification settings for system users. So a lot of these if they have instructor next to them, it's going to notify the instructor when those lessons get booked. And so based on your notification setup, so you've got email as a default that's always available. If you've enabled push notifications, you can enable push notifications for those booking notices, and for those cancellation notices, things like that. If a lesson is updated or edited, they'll get the notices on those. And then if you're also subscribed to text messaging, you can text message those notifications to pros as well. Yes, and then pros can be notified by text if you have text enabled. All right, so moving right along, we talked about booking lessons. Let's get into a little bit of my schedule here. So I'm going to, how do I want to do this? Let me just think real quick. So I gave that pro, oh, you know what? We forgot to talk about events. Let's talk about events and then we'll go into my schedule. So a pro, we talked about lessons, and let's talk about events. So events are going to be, again, very similar to your, lessons, except you've got a full event booked out and you want to add instructors to it so it appears on their schedule. So when you're creating events or editing events, you have a instructor right here. So you have an instructor that you can assign to the event. Now, if this is a recurring event, way to think about this is this is the master info about your event, and then you have the date level about your event. So if I know that as a whole, these 3 instructors are generally going to be teaching this class, or I'm creating the schedule months in advance, these are who I'm assigning to it. But maybe I find out, a few weeks in that an instructor is not going to be available, maybe for one date, you can actually come in and you can edit an occurrence to remove an instructor who might not be available on a specific day. Also at the date level, you are able to also, and at the general info level as well, but it's cool to do on the date level too, but you also have the ability to control the amount of time that your pros are scheduled on a court as well. So if you have, let's say you have a class, this is an hour and a half, but I know that this coach is only going to be teaching for the first hour. I can go in and I can say that this coach comes off at this time. And now it opens up that pro's schedule to be booked for something else that starts at 10:30. So while my event is an hour and a half, I can say that I want my specific pros to only be available for a certain amount of time, and free up their schedule for other things. All right, so we've assigned instructors to events. I've got some instructor schedules built out. So how do I, as an admin, kind of manage this? So again, I have an instructor scheduler that I have access to through this. Again, this was a sub-admin setting, so I could give the instructor scheduler to sub-admins. Maybe if I have a higher level pro that's going to be doing all my scheduling that maybe isn't an admin, I can allow them through having the visibility to the instructor scheduler to then give them viewability to what their pros hours are and what their schedules are. So again, this is a fictitious club, so I don't have too many things built out on my instructor's schedules, but I kind of built out tomorrow just to kind of give you an idea of what this looks like. So I can actually come in here at a week view, or I'm sorry, a daily view or a weekly view and look at my instructors. So if I'm on the daily view like I am right now, I'm going to see all of my instructors. I can filter this as well. So I can say I only want to see certain lesson types. And it's did not filter, so we'll have to look at that. We can only look at certain lesson types, or you can only look at certain pros and filter those out as well. And then here I can switch to my weekly view. And if I'm looking at the weekly view, then I can see a specific instructor. And so if I've built out, I just kind of want to see where an instructor's at, where their gaps are and things across the week to maybe add something on there. I can go add that here really easily to an individual instructor. It's also super useful if you've got somebody that's calling up over the phone and is like, hey, can you tell me when Johnny is available for the next week, and kind of help somebody work around the scheduler and where he's open over the next week. Now you'll notice that my date here starts on Saturday. So we actually have a feature in the system that allows you to control the start day of the week for an instructor's schedule. And so this is important if you have maybe you run a payroll on an off, kind of an off schedule. We have some organizations that do this. So a lot of clubs are going to operate on a Sunday through Saturday, a standard 7-day work week that goes Sunday through Saturday. But then you also get clubs that maybe operate on a slightly different schedule. The club I used to work at in Pennsylvania, we considered our start day of the week to be Monday. So we would go Mondays through Sundays, or I have worked at another club where their payroll ran Saturday to Friday. So if you have different schedules like that, or you have different payroll schedules that you run on, you're definitely going to want to check out this setting to control the instructor start day of the week, because then it's calculating the number of hours appropriately. I'll show you the hours in a second. But to get to that setting, you're going to go to Settings, General, and we have your organization start day of the week. That controls your main schedulers and things like that. But then your instructor scheduler start day of the week controls what you were seeing previously on the instructor scheduler. So this says, again, if I'm in that weekly view or looking by week, my start day is going to start on Saturday versus my normal organization start day of the week, which shows your members essentially on the member portal, a Sunday through Saturday type of thing. This would then calculate my instructor's hours based on a Saturday through Friday. So I hope that wasn't too confusing. So you'll want to, once you have that set, if you do operate kind of on a slightly different payroll, we do offer here an hours summary as well. So you can check out your pros hours summary. Let's go to this week. And again, you can do some filters here. So if I've got, just want to see specific pros, I can filter by specific pros, and I can see their total hours that all of my pros are booked for the week. So that's where this section of this table comes into play here. So I can see that this pro is booked for this many hours of lessons, this many hours of events, for a total of this many hours for the entire week that we're displaying here. You can also do this at the instructor level. If I go by day, oh, it's on the, hold on one second, that is on the mobile app. So let's switch over to the mobile app real quick. I'll show you, an instructor can actually keep track of their hours by day on the mobile app. I've got this instructor schedule set up right here, so we'll kind of shift into viewing my schedule and booking lessons here on the app. But this is the mobile app, and so the instructor can actually go into my schedule now and see either their schedule by week. I actually really like this weekly view on mobile app because you can't see it here, but it will rotate based on your phone's orientation. So you can rotate your phone to sideways or landscape, and it's going to show you that week across your phone screen. And then if you're looking at it by day, looking at it in portrait mode is a way to go here. So you can actually see the total number of hours that this pro has in my schedule, and then the total hours that they're booked for the week. You can click this and also see that weekly summary, so they can then see by day how many hours that they're booked. You can see Wednesday and Thursday I've built out here, so these are the only ones that have hours in them, but it gives the pro a nice summary of where they're at for the week. So maybe they have full-time, part-time minimums and maximums and things like that that they can hit. So this is a good way for them to keep track of that as well. And then when it comes to actually booking, the pros can book their own lessons directly on their schedule. They can also add unavailable time this way as well. So you can go in here and this instructor can just add a specific lesson to their scheduler if they wanted. Josh, we're going to throw a lesson on the scheduler for you here. And then select court. I'll need to look at that. Sometimes when we're on the mobile view, it's not super responsive when it comes to the clicks here, but you would add the court here, and then the lesson would be booked and sent to the player with confirmations, whether you've got text or push or email confirmations and stuff like that as well. So that's kind of the mobile app. And then also, now that this instructor, you can see he's got quite a full schedule. This instructor can actually go in to the events and things like that they're scheduled for. So down here, I've got this navigation. I'm going to go back to my event maybe for tomorrow. And let's say this instructor wants to check players in for these events. You can allow the instructor to check in players directly from the court on their app. Or they can also notify players, maybe if something's happened last minute, they need to let them know they're running 10 minutes late or something like that. But don't worry, I'll add 10 minutes on at the end, that kind of thing. They can create a message here directly from their phone, and it will send it to those different areas that you've given them access to based on their sub-admin settings. So in this case, I gave them the ability to email and text players. And so now they can choose specific players, or they can choose, all of the players if they want to as well. From this type of view, they can also register additional players to the event. They can process payments as well and things like that, depending on how you have them set up to take payments. And then they can also edit these events and lessons to change courts if they need to. Maybe add an additional instructor if they see that their registration's getting up there. Stuff like that. All right, Josh, do we have any questions that I can answer?
Yeah, we did have somebody that was just asking if we could go back to the event page where you can edit the time that the
Yeah,
instructor, it looks like it is for the event date. So maybe we can just show all
yeah,
the
I'll show
event
you that real
setup.
quick. I went through it pretty quickly before. So if you are on an event, you can actually edit the amount of time the instructor is on that event. either at the main event level. So I know that every week Johnny is only going to teach from 9:30 to 10:30. I can edit his schedule now for every week to be 9:30 to 10:30. Okay, so that means that on his schedule, he's only going to show up from 9:30 to 10:30, and he's going to be available starting at 10:30 to have lessons. Now you can see here that I have overwritten dates selected, so I'm glad we went through this too. If you have edited something at the individual date level for instructors, whether this is happening for instructors or dates, it's going to tell you that you have overridden dates selected. And so if you want to override those dates, review the list to change the instructors for the dates that were previously added individually. So if I don't touch these dates, the changes that I make here are not going to affect these dates specifically because I have made individual edits to instructors on these dates. So if I check this box, now it's going to override those specific dates that I edited, and it's going to show that, this pro is available from 9:30 to 10:30. It's also going to override any edits that I made previously. So make sure you're paying attention to that if you've made individual event date edits and then you go back and edit something at the master level. It can be pretty easy to get a little bit out of sync there. But it's definitely something to note that you can either mass update at the entire event level, or you can granularly go into the instructor and change the time if you have less people. So we're going to run drills for the first hour. I need 3 people, and then I can have somebody leave and go teach a lesson for the last 30 minutes or something like that. Or they can go to another event that starts at that time. So I hope that answered that question.
Awesome.
Let's go back over where the price and costs are input for lessons and events. So your events, since I'm already here, your event pricing is gonna live in the event. Now, the pricing for an event does not have anything to do with the instructor on the event. So we're not saying when I book Johnny on an event, the event price is going to be this much money. That's not what we're doing here. So if you know that you want to charge a specific rate when an instructor teaches at an event, you're going to have to update the pricing for each membership type according to the rate that you want to set based on that instructor. Okay, so events are different from lessons in that way. You set the pricing at the membership type level for the entire event, and you just have to know the pricing that you want to charge based on the instructor if the instructor is teaching that. For actual lessons, you're going to go to your instructor settings and you're going to go to instructor pricing. And so that's where I get this table that shows me all of my instructors that I have in the system and all of the lesson types that they've been assigned to. One thing I want to point out is if you ever run into a situation where you are missing an instructor from one of these sections, we actually get this in support every once in a while. If you're missing an instructor from one of these sections, it's probably because they don't have a scheduling restriction checked off for that lesson type. So if I go in here and I remove private lessons for all of these pros, when I go over in here into instructor pricing, you're not going to see that section on here anymore. So if a pro is not appearing for a specific lesson type, it's because you just haven't offered this lesson type as something that can be booked for that pro. So you want to make sure that you're looking at this table if you have added any lesson types, because you do have to enable it at the pro level. So then you can set the pricing for that lesson type. Okay. Cool. I think that takes care of that one. Let's see. We talked a little bit about instructor communications. I can email players from the court. I showed you how to do that here in this instructor scheduler. You can go in here. You can edit lessons, and you can talk to players and things like that through email and text message if you want to notify them. The next thing I want to touch briefly on here, before we, kind of wrap things up, is we also have an instructor time report. And I found out recently just through support that we might have quite a few admins that don't know that we have this report available. So you definitely want to check out the instructor time report. This is going to be just a really, it's a powerful report. You can definitely pull the information that you need if you kind of, give it a little bit of thought, but you can pull specific timing for instructors based on lesson types, how much time they were on the court for specific periods of time. It's going to be very similar to that table that I showed you a few minutes ago about my hours summary for all of my pros, but this is going to break it down for you in a format that you can export to Excel. You can also see the total number. You can also break it down by lesson types, by event types. You've got some different event tags in here as well. So you can also, you can get some very granular reporting in here if you have some of the output, if you know some of the outputs that you're looking for. So I'm just going to do a very, easy report here from my start day, which let's say I went, I think I went Monday. So and I just want to look at this specific period of time. I can go run that report and it's going to tell me the total number of hours, court hours, um, that they were booked for, total lesson hours, total reservation hours, and total event hours that pro was booked for. So it's a good snapshot to tell me, maybe how many hours that this pro worked for a specific week. I can, do this for last week if I'm running payroll. I can pull the total number of hours that pro worked. And then also if I was breaking this down by, event type or lesson type, I could then do some calculations based on maybe how much I owe that instructor and things like that. All right, let's, Josh, I see some questions. We can go through some of them?
Yeah, it looks like they actually are both related to setting up lessons so that they are in a pending status when a member books them.
Yeah.
So the first one is, can a member book a lesson with a pro, but the system show it as pending until the pro approves that lesson?
So right now, Josh, you're gonna have to help me through this one. Right now, I believe if you have approvals turned on, so when a player books a lesson online that requires approvals, that lesson does not show technically as pending for that player. I believe that player will see that lesson under my bookings, even if it's not approved. Do you recall that?
Correct. I believe it is on the scheduler unless it gets declined. Um,
Yes.
but when but when you're setting up Book a Pro, you can set it so that it is in that pending state where an admin needs to go ahead and either approve it or decline it.
Yeah, so then an admin could then go into their to-do list, and we do have a section in the to-do list for lesson approvals. If you give the instructor the ability to do approvals on their own lessons, they have a to-do list that would show up on their home of their app here as well. So they could go into their app, and if they have something that they need to pay attention to based on their admin sub-admin settings, they can approve their own lessons too. And then those would be confirmed on their schedule. But yeah, we can look at if there's a feature enhancement that we can do there around clarity to the members, because I think that I have seen that in support.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, and it looks like we just had somebody come in with that, so we can definitely take a look at that after this webinar. And then the second question was just, is it available for the instructor to approve the booking? So that is going to be one of those sub-admin permissions that you can
yeah.
set up for the instructor.
Let me show you where that instructor setting lives. So if I'm looking at my system users, again, this is a permission for sub-admins since admins can actually always approve reservations on that to-do list. So if I wanted to give that ability to my instructor, I'm going to go edit that instructor's settings. Let me open the guy that I've been working with here. And you're going to go down to, I'm going to code our admin hack here is Control F. So can approval permissions, that's where you're going to want to go. So you can approve owned lessons only. So if this instructor can only approve their own lessons, then they would only see lessons for their approval. If you had somebody that had some higher level of, maybe instructors, it's a head pro or director of tennis or something like that, they can maybe approve all lessons. So they would see every lesson that comes in. But in this instance, this instructor is only seeing lessons that they are booked on. That's what owned reflects. All right. Well, that is all that I kind of had prepared for us today. Josh, Ashley, if you're still with us, do you guys have anything to add here about anything I may have missed about instructors?
Nope, all set.
I was gonna
Okay,
say, not that I can
awesome.
think of. Looks like we got all the questions answered too.
Yeah, great. So again, thank you everybody for joining us today. We will have this webinar available to you on our YouTube channel within the next 24 hours. So definitely check that out. And we look forward to having more awesome things for instructors out here for you in the future. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you later.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.